And so, the hunt begins again.
Video games are exciting precisely because they offer us freedom. Freedom to explore a new world. Freedom to shoot a bunch of zombies and get corresponding endorphin hits based on the color of the boots we loot from them. Oh, and also hats. Don't ever forget the hats. Today we're circling back to bring you a little recap of some of my favorite weird, cool, creepy, and well-kept secrets in games. Hideo Kojima is one of those developers you have to watch out for in gaming because if you turn your back on him for even 1 second, he will slip something so completely absurd, fourth wall breaking, and out of the box that almost no one will find it. A perfect example of this that many players missed on their first playthrough of Metal Gear Solid 3 is the boss fight with geriatric sniper, The End. Normally, to beat this sharpshooter of advanced age, the player must engage in a sneaky sniper duel across no less than 3 zones. However, The End is actually trivial to beat if you're willing to be patient. If you save mid-battle, quit the game, and don't play it for 8 days, or just set your PlayStation clock forward the same amount of time, The End will have just up and died of old age when you load the save. 2007's The Darkness is not a game that comes up much in conversation anymore, but it has 2 details going for it. First of all, the protagonist looks suspiciously like Tommy Wiseau, which...
How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go, keep the change. Hi, doggy.
Yeah. Second, early in the game, the main character's girlfriend will invite you to join her on the couch in her new apartment for a quiet evening in. After she turns on the TV, a black and white movie starts while she makes a quip at the player about wanting to take the remote from her. At any point after this, the player may get up and continue the game. Except if they don't, the movie, an actual full cut of seminal classic To Kill a Mockingbird, will continue playing for the full 2-hour runtime. Wario Land 2 is a straight-up weird game that was also a little ahead of its time. More experimental in many ways than the Mario series from which Wario is derived, Wario Land 2 not only let players have allergic reactions to bees and turn into a zombie, but it also contained a multitude of secret-level exits leading to alternate endings. All of these are scattered throughout the latter 2/3 of the game, except for this one. When the game opens, Wario is shown sleeping in his bed while his castle is infiltrated. A massive alarm clock is set to wake him up, but the player can choose to just not press any buttons. Wario will just keep snoozing until the invaders find him and carry him off to a short set of alternate levels, leading to a much quicker ending. Despite being a commercial flop on release, Tim Schafer's Psychonauts was another game whose only crime was being ahead of its time. Almost all of the colorful characters that people Whispering Rock Psychic Summer Camp have something to hide, but it's within the mind of the most colorful that players can come across the most painful secret of all. During the groovy dance party level that takes place inside the mind of Agent Milla Vodello, Raz can float over to a secret room. Upon doing so, the player will hear Milla's voice chiding him and asking him to return to the party. If they don't, though, they will discover a room bathed in flames in which the voices of suffering children can be heard begging Milla to save them from the fire. There's a memory vault inside the room too, which, when opened, tells the story of Milla's tragic past. While working at an orphanage, Milla left to do some shopping, only to return to the building, children and all, going up in flames. This sequence was missed by plenty of players, but I think it remains one of the most clever depictions of repressed trauma in media. Silent Hill 2. Oh, Silent Hill 2. There might not be another game as influential in showing how to do horror well. James Sunderland's gruesome romp through a town warped by the memories of his own horrible actions is a tough pill to swallow, especially with Pyramid Head and the nurses running around, but there's some good news for fans who are curious what was really going on in the town of Silent Hill. If James manages to find the dog key and use it to enter the observation room on the 3rd floor of the Lakeview Hotel, both he and the player will be greeted by the sight of a dog seated behind what looks like a massive control room, implying that it was actually tech-savvy Shiba Inu tormenting James the whole time. Oh, and then the credits roll to the sound of a song made up of dog barks. The Soulsborne series of games by From Software make this list a couple of times, but one of my favorite hidden details comes from the original Dark Souls title. One of the required bosses that must be defeated is Sif, a great big pupper that can be found guarding the grave of his deceased master, Artorias. Here's the rub though. If players own the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, they have the ability to travel in time, during which they discover Sif is a pup in need of help. It's possible to save Sif in the past before fighting him in the present, which leads to a heart-wrenching single change to the boss cinematic. This time, when Sif leaps in front of the grave to defend his master, he will recognize the player and hesitate because he recognizes you. Ultimately, Sif still engages the player, but it makes killing him and taking his soul feel way worse. All dogs go to heaven, right? Half-Life 2 Episode 2, a confusingly named game, if ever there was one, involves Gordon Freeman crossing more wasteland to link up with members of the anti-Combine resistance and launch an important rocket into space. The catch, in one of the first areas of the game, the player can find and pick up a garden gnome. This garden gnome may then be painstakingly escorted all the way to the launch sequence and then crammed in the rocket and sent to space. Doing so unlocks the Gnome Alone achievement. One of the least believable parts of the Assassin's Creed series is the bit where every protagonist can jump from the roof of the Hagia Sophia or Tower of London and land safely in like a 4-foot bale of hay, which is saying something in a game about ancient alien techno-gods. To poke a bit of fun at the required suspension of disbelief, developers of The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings added an Easter egg where Geralt can stumble across an upturned bale of hay with a corpse next to it, dressed in what looks to be good old assassin robes. American McGee's Alice the Madness Returns is not a good game. It is, though, a pretty game and a clever game. The game itself is preoccupied with issues of mental health, trauma, abuse, and repression, as shown via an exploration of one's own mental landscape. You know, kind of like Psychonauts. The similarities don't stop there. Deep in the catacombs of the Queen of Hearts castle, the player can come across a skeleton wearing Raz's red goggles and doing the astral projection pose. Dead Space is a creepy game about an engineer who gets stuck with a bunch of heinous alien zombies after following a distress call from his girlfriend Nicole. Spoilers, Nicole turns out to actually be dead, a point not revealed until the penultimate scene, except the developers left a hint in the chapter select screen. If you read only the first letter of each chapter, it spells out Nicole is dead. Halo's Master Chief is one of the least compelling protagonists in a game since Doomguy, but at least he has one thing going for him: complete control over space military manufacturing. How do I know this? Because of this Easter egg hidden in most of the Halo games. Every bullet fired from humanity's various weapons has an engraving on its base that reads Chief. Yeah, Master Chief puts his name on not just his own bullets, but all the bullets ever. Real modest guy. One of gaming's worst written and worst acted scenes comes from Resident Evil, when a slow-moving ceiling almost turns protagonist Jill Valentine into a Jill sandwich. Lest the iconic terribleness of this sequence be forgotten, fellow zombie game Dead Rising immortalized the banality by preserving it in the form of a Subway-style sandwich shop called Jill's Sandwiches. Probably don't want to know what the meat is made of, though. I could do a 25-entry list of hidden Easter eggs and details in just the Fallout series of games, but instead, I'm just gonna bring up one of my and the internet's favorites. While wandering the post-nuclear wasteland of the Mojave Desert in Fallout New Vegas, the player may come across a fridge in a ditch. Open the fridge, what do you find? A skeleton inside wearing a hat resembling the one worn by Harrison Ford during the patently absurd scene in Indiana Jones 4. The Lost World Jurassic Park isn't a game people should talk about, period. It's unremarkable in all ways, except for one. Unbeknownst to most players, Jeff Goldblum actually reprises his role as Ian Malcolm in it. but only if the player unlocks the secret ending by collecting every DNA bonus in the game. If they do, they're rewarded with a congratulations by the legend himself, followed by a thorough dressing down. Check it out. Shadow of the Colossus is a modern classic in large part because of its beautiful, spacious, but ultimately pretty empty landscape. The world, while not barren, isn't overstuffed with minigames or secret collectibles, but even so, there is one Easter egg that took most fans years to discover if they discovered it at all. Remember those lizards crawling around once in a while? A carefully aimed arrow will kill any given one of those lizards, but that's not all. Once the lizard is downed, it can be eaten for a brief boost. Borderlands 2 is the complete opposite of Shadow of the Colossus. It's a game totally rife with content, side quests, jokes, treasure, that one rare enemy bark where a psycho will recite the entirety of Hamlet's first soliloquy, that kind of thing. But some fans missed the Minecraft Easter egg in Caustic Caverns. The area isn't one you reach until a decent portion through the game itself, but once there, it's possible to find a wall that can be broken in proper Minecraft fashion, behind which is a cavern filled with creepers. And yes, they do explode. You might not know this about me, but I don't go to Ravenholm anymore. For those not accustomed to being the right man in the wrong place, Ravenholm is a ruined town in Half-Life 2, which has been overtaken by headcrabs, the game's face-hugging, zombie-making aliens. All of the residents have been turned into hideous monsters, including some dreaded fast zombies, and they can be heard shrieking, gurgling, and groaning all through the area. It's all gibberish though, of course, unless you play it backwards, at which point it becomes clear that they are in fact screaming, "Help, God help me." The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, follow-up installment in the series after Majora's Mask, involves a lot of open exploration over the sea in a talking boat that might be your girlfriend's dad, which, okay, fine, Japan. But amongst all the usual suspects in a Zelda game's arsenal, bow, bomb, hookshot, fancy sword, shiny shield, boomerang, suspiciously obtained pieces of living beings' hearts, the game includes one pretty well hidden artifact, the magic armor. In order to get it, Link has to complete a convoluted fetch quest involving flower trading across multiple islands. In From Software's terribly named
Get the out of here.
but brilliant Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, there's a hidden Easter egg that has the unusual trait, well, unusual in a Soulsborne game anyway, of being an actual reference to a totally separate piece of media. Now, it might be an oversight or a coincidence, but when the player collects the fulminated mercury upgrade material for their shinobi prosthetic, the item description ends with, "The Central Forces military owes much to this tiny tweak in chemistry." That last bit might sound familiar to fans of Breaking Bad because it's exactly how Walter describes his own use of the same substance during his exchange with Tuco in the episode Crazy Handful of Nothing. Technically, Walt says little instead of tiny, but hey, nobody likes a pedantic Pete, okay? One of the great big reveals in Arkham City is that the Joker defeated early on by Batman was actually Clayface in disguise. As it happens though, this information can be gleaned through implication if the player thinks to use the Batsuit's detective vision to scan faux Joker during their first fight. The scanner reveals that the Joker doesn't have a skeleton, unlike every other character model in the game. Some players might have noticed this at the time and written it off as a glitch, but it's not. It's just a clever nod to the physiology of one of Gotham's weirder villains. Time for another spooky one. During the hotel mission, Traditions of the Trade in Hitman Contracts, Agent 47 can be made to carefully evade some cops and a line of yellow crime scene tape in order to gain access to room 106. Then, if the player looks at the bathroom mirror in the suite, they can see a ghost appear just behind the bald and barcoded boy himself and linger there, haunting. Dark Souls 3 here, just calling to remind you that the Shrine Maiden merchant is probably Sirris of the Sunless Realm's grandmother. The only way to find this out, though, is to check the merchant's wares after collecting Sirris's quest and killing Aldrich. The Maiden will be offering a special version of the Green Blossom item for much cheaper than its usual price. Take a peek at the item description, and it reveals the flowers include a note left by Sirris to her grandmother, implying that the Shrine Maiden is also married to the thoroughly insane head of the Mound Maker's Covenant, Aldrich. Oh, and another Dark Souls 3 detail. During the battle with Saint Aldrich of the Deep, which takes place in a rhyme-bound future version of Anor Londo, it's easy to mistake the floating body puppet in the room as Aldrich himself, but it's not. The player is actually looking at the corpse of a hidden boss from Dark Souls 1, namely Dark Sun Gwendolyn. The actual Aldrich is the sludge all over the floor, which has been in hibernation while feeding on the corpse of the dead god. The original Animal Crossing was a genre definer to be sure, but one of my favorite things about it is a detail most fans overlooked. In the original game, player characters could obtain NES game systems as furniture. Cute tie-in, right? Even better, the player could play single NES games through those pieces of furniture like a mini-game. Well, it turns out that wasn't just a case-by-case thing per furniture piece. OG Animal Crossing actually contains an entire NES emulator, theoretically capable of playing any NES ROM. In other words, a video game with a program inside it to play video games. Though not hidden to any fans of classic rock, some of the younger players of Bioshock Infinite conceivably missed this detail. Many of the songs sung by citizens in Colombia or heard over phonograph are actually time-shifted versions of modern classics. Songs include Girls Just Wanna Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper, God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, and Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival. Until next time, just be glad I didn't have the courage to bring up Violet City. That theme is just so ghastly. Get it? Anyone? Ghost Pokemon? My rival's deceased Raticate? Yeah, tough crap.